Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Highwaymen Social. Today I have with me a very dear friend, Margie MacMahon. She is the author of the new Al Black book, Painted Black. She has chronicled the life of Al Black from beginning to end, and she and I share a good friend with some great ups and down stories. Al has been a wonderful inspiration to the Highwayman story, and he certainly keeps us all laughing from time to time. Marge, let's begin at the beginning.
Okay.
How did you begin? How did you learn about the Highwayman story and Al Black, and how did that happen?
Okay. Well, I came to Florida about 5 years ago now, and one of my first stops was the Bacchus Museum, where I became acquainted with the beautiful pictures. Just was so impressed by the paintings, got to know the Roger Lytle story a bit. And from there, I decided I wanted to learn more about the Highwaymen, so I searched out some local highwaymen, 14th Avenue McClendons, Roy and Ray, and did some work with Ray, and then I met other second generation legacy artists, and eventually went to the Elliott Museum, and that's where I met Al. And then from there, I decided I really want to write a book on Al because everything that I read about him before meeting him suggested that he was super important to the Highwayman movement and story.
He is very, very important. I remember the Elliott Museum exhibit. So,
Yeah.
so it was a real fancy event at the Elliott, and all of the paintings are on the wall, and Al is classic Al.
Yeah.
He borrows a pickup truck from Todd.
Yeah.
Borrows paintings because he has no paintings left in his inventory, and then puts them all out in front of the museum for sale. And it was such a quintessential great Al Black moment. I remember that. You know, he's known for his charisma as a salesman. There's no question about that. You know, before becoming an artist. And let's talk a little bit about that and your experience with Al and his personality.
Well, from that time, I knew that there were a couple of reasons that he was going to be my focus, and one was his personality and his dynamic way of dealing with people, and his dual role in the Highwayman movement, because he had started not as an artist but as a salesman, and he wasn't just any old salesman for the Highwaymen artists. He was the top salesman for Alfred Hare, and he was critical to the success of the movement in terms of getting the most paintings sold. And then when he became an artist, produced more paintings than any other highwayman, I think by far, because he's still doing it every single day of his life today.
Al once told me that he could sell a ketchup popsicle to a June bride. and I bet you probably have seen that, and well, you just don't ever leave Al's house without buying something.
You don't, not even as a writer. You do not leave his company without purchasing something.
Have you ever left the house and not bought something?
Maybe once or twice, but that once or twice is not a lot compared
Were you
to
running?
the large. Yeah. we were on a roll, had somewhere else to go.
Right.
But,
I can honestly say it's never happened with me. Okay, but
It is
you know,
true.
Al is a wonderful salesman. He is probably one of the most charismatic people in terms of sales that I have ever seen.
Yes.
And he can sell almost anything.
Well, Marianne Carroll, right? She had the famous saying that he could sell a mosquito a jacket in the summertime, and
Yep.
that's absolutely true.
Yep. And I, every now and then I tell that story about my wife. He was doing a sales event, and we were in the middle of an auction. So my wife walks by him to go to Starbucks to get a latte, and he sells her a painting. Okay, no big deal. We've got a gallery full of them, but he sells her one,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
On the way back, he sells her a book to go with the painting.
Of course.
10 minutes later, she's out of latte. She's going back down to Starbucks. The auction's still going on. And she's not getting past him unless he sells her another painting.
Mm-hmm.
She said, I just bought one from you. She said, yeah, but you need to buy another one. So she bought another painting.
Yeah.
On the way back, she bought another book. There was no getting past it.
See, it is so
It's
true.
just the
If
way
you
it is
spend
with Al.
5 minutes
He's a
with
great
him,
salesman.
He is.
Yeah, he is.
Absolutely
Well,
is.
Al's life took a dramatic turn, you know, and We have a little bit of a story about that, his time in prison. Did he really share much of that with you?
He did. In fact, he said it was really what saved his life, and it was the highlight of his life, actually. He credits his ability to get up every day to his experience in prison. Interestingly, he actually inspired a lot of guys while he was in prison. And it sort of goes right back to his mother's teaching. When he was a child, he said his mother said, respect, respect, respect. You have to earn respect, if you want respect. And he would tell the inmates that, and they would look up to him, not only because of the beautiful way that he transformed, their environment and gave them something to think about, but, because he was able to do some things that they couldn't.
The Highwaymen story, the early part of the Highwaymen story, the earliest part of the Al Black story when he came here from Mississippi to Florida, not knowing what art was, not knowing anything. As he told the story to me, that he was told that money was growing on trees in Florida. And when he arrived in Florida after hitchhiking his way to Florida as a 14-year-old boy, he found out that money growing on trees was orange.
Yeah.
And that really began his career. So it all happened during a time of segregation. How do you really contextualize that? How do you really put that into perspective? If there was ever one of the people of the group that could bridge the gap, bridge the racial gap of the late 50s, early 60s, it was clearly Al.
It was clearly Al. And he said to me, and this goes back to his plantation days, not a lot of people know this, but he was born on a plantation in Barlow, Mississippi, which isn't far from Jackson. And his life there in the Jim Crow South in Mississippi, one of the, probably least desirable places for an African American to be at the time, he said the way that he dealt with it was that he learned how to deal with all kinds of people from different economic backgrounds, different colors, different everything. And that he carried with him when he came to Fort Pierce when citrus was king, and the migrant movement to Fort Pierce. He carried all of that.
He drove the trucks. He drove the migrant workers. He was able to gather up workers.
And not only did he drive the migrant workers, he also had carloads, truckloads of citrus that he would go back and forth down the East Coast and up the East Coast.
Yep. Margie covers all of this in the book, and the story of Al's resilience and his ability to overcome adversity is laid out in there, and I really encourage you to read it. It's going to be a great book when it's out. She put together 164 pages of text, and the book is about to go to press. We're looking forward to this. Your book focuses on his life decade by decade. Talk a little bit more about your approach to how you decided to bring it in decade by decade.
Well, I think that previous works on Al Black have been a little bit different, because I know Gary Monroe focused largely on the prison experience, and any other snippets that have been put out there have been shorter interviews and write-ups based on interviews with Al. And he loves to say the same things to people in various interviews, including with me, but we go beyond that. Right. And I thought it was important to sort of characterize with what was going on in Florida, because the Highwaymen do preserve the historically, not only the landscape, but the actual history of Florida, and go decade by decade what's happening with Al and where he, made some decisions that maybe weren't the best for him, and how he turned everything around, and in his view, and in the view of some, got redemption for a lot of the negative choices he may have made. Got it. Yep, that is accurate. And now, he preserves the legacy is important to Al, as well as telling the Highwaymen story. That's so important. That is very, very true. That's the most important thing to Al. Al has been known to embellish a story or two. Yes, he has.
How do you cut through all of that and get, the sizzle is better than the steak.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay. How do you cut through all of that and find out what's steak and what's sizzle? And did you in fact do that in the book? Did you cut through all of that?
I think I cut through most of it as well as anyone could dealing with a character like Al. But talking to people around Al, in his circle, you get to kind of know. And I, having known him for so long now and met him for so many times and experienced so many things with him, I feel like, separately he would tell me, I may have embellished, or, no, that really was the truth. It really did happen. As surreal as some of the things are that happened to Al, a lot of them are true.
There are times that I spend with Al, and the trinity of birds in his painting, there was a time that I thought, well, that's sizzle. And not steak.
Yeah.
And then there are days that I really have it embedded in my mind that his heart really is with the Lord, and that it's steak and not sizzle.
Oh, I think
what are your thoughts?
I think it's steak, Paul, because in his house, on his mantle, he has old statues of the three birds that he's kept forever, and he'd be the first one to show a newcomer, here are my three birds. And he talks about God, and he feels like he's done his time for the things that he did that maybe he shouldn't have done, and so he feels, in some ways, we're looking at a painting here with three birds. Occasionally you'll see he puts four birds, because he says now he feels like he's redeemed, and you'll see an extra bird because now he's risen from the ground and sort of paid back some of his...
Well, there you have it. Margie says steak. How do you, obviously Al has a relationship with each of the members of the group. His closest relationship was with Alfred Hare.
Yes.
And then he went on to spend time and work with all of the other artists. Who do you think he's closest with? Well, where do you think he fits in? Obviously, he's part of the if you will, the core group of founding members. Only 5 remain. Where do you think he falls in that group?
He, in terms of the Highwaymen in general, the original Highwaymen, super close to Alfred. He spent many days, nights, first being Alfred's salesman, but also learning how to mix colors with Alfred, and just going from being the best salesman to learning how to fix the paintings in his car that he would put in there wet that Alfred would give him. He'd have to fix, little scratches and scrapes. And that's how he says he learned how to paint, by watching Alfred, because he was in his company. Even if he wasn't painting, or even if he wasn't working, he was over at Alfred's house a lot. He also really liked Castro, Livingston Roberts, and of course Isaac Knight, his brother-in-law. And he helped Isaac learn how to paint in Isaac's garage, actually.
Okay, we're going to jump around a little bit here.
Oh, okay.
What challenges did you face as you researched Al's life and you go through these colorful times and his troubled past? What was the easy part and what was the difficult part? When I spend time with Al, there are days that I think I know him. And then there are days that I look at him and I go, I don't really know him at all. Have you ever had one of those moments?
I have. I actually think that now, after 2 years, actually having met him probably a year and a half before I started the book, I feel that I do know him. In the end, I know him because I feel he has a good heart. I really do. I can overlook a lot of the things that he's done, that he admits that he's done.
But there are there things that he does that just flat out surprise you on a day-to-day basis?
Well, you know, funny things.
Yeah.
He still talks a lot about, and this is in the book, the experience with Elvis's guitar.
Yes.
And
which version did you get? No, we'll save that for the book. We'll save that for the book. But I do want to tell you, you know, I've known Al for, I don't know, it's probably been 15 years, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think I know Al pretty well.
Right.
And then one day we were lining up some paintings that I was buying from him. And I've got my phone and I'm counting, they're all different sizes and dimensions and all that. Yeah. So it's not something you could pre-plan.
No.
And I'm there with my phone adding it up, and he looks at the stack and he goes, "You owe me $9,750. And I go, "I don't know." So I'm another 5 minutes with my telephone, okay, trying to figure out the number. Sure enough, it comes to exactly that.
Yeah.
That there in that man there is a boy. A teddy bear of a man, mm-hmm. and then a genius that's just nobody knows.
You know, that
no
is
one actually knows it.
Perfect way to describe him, because he doesn't really let that out to a lot of people. But it's so true, because think of can you imagine being born in a plantation in Mississippi, being a black boy who really didn't even have a third grade education? I mean, he told me that he would go to school maybe 10 days out of a school year, and that's just from the first to the third grade on a good year.
Yeah.
Yet he was able to, you know, become inducted in the Florida Artists Hall of Fame.
And he's a mathematical genius. Doesn't need to remembers your phone number, doesn't need to write it down.
Businessman. Yeah. He's got the memory of an elephant, in his words. I mean, it's amazing things that come from Al on a daily basis. You know, and there are so many memorable things that and we've saved all that for the book. Margie has put together, I don't know, let's say 99 fantastic stories of Al Black. Oh, I don't know about that, but
many of which are true, and then many of which are just the wonderful mythology of Al Black. He's a great artist. We've seen a resurgence in the popularity of Highwayman art. Al Black's story fits into this renewed interest. Tell me what your thoughts are on that, and I'll share mine.
Well, he fits into this whole resurgence because he's actively doing it. I mean, he's actively at 78 years old, he's actively out there pounding the pavement, doing the art shows, doing interviews, doing the painting in his garage, inviting people over, selling his work. And he, because of who he is and his tremendous, regardless of what happens to him, his spirit is resilience, and that's so strong despite the current recent deaths of one of his good friends and his sister. No matter what he goes through, the Highwaymen story is the focus of his life.
Yep. And you know, when you look at the artists that are still left with us, Mr. Reagan, R.L., Curtis, Sam, and Al, all of the rest of that group are pretty quiet. They're quiet personalities.
Absolutely.
And Al is still out there being the master salesman. When you look back, when you look at what makes a collectible, this is one of the great questions that we get asked all the time, particularly of auction houses. What makes something collectible, and what's the next thing? And in the time that we spent analyzing it, when we look at the next generation of people, what they want to own, the millennial generation, if you will, they are now coming into the fold, becoming part of this story. Historically, all they've ever wanted to own is the experience.
Right.
They want to travel the world before they're 25. We didn't get a passport until well after that.
Right.
and so they want to own the experience rather than own the stuff. Whereas in our generation, we wanted to own the stuff. Exactly. And now they're coming back and wanting to own the stuff. And Al is that magnanimous personality that makes Highwaymen art an icon of its time, not only in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, but now in 2025, that iconic personality is out there. And that really is the core of a collectible. It has to be an icon of its time.
Yes.
Consumed in its day, and then as that youthful person moves forward in life and reaches the peak of their earning capability, they reach back to their childhood or to their youth for that icon. And Al Black is that icon. He is the one that they meet at the shows, the personality that they look at and go, oh, he's the real deal.
I've actually seen younger people buy his art because of the stories and the person that he is.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We brought the team from the movie over to meet Al, and the directors, the logistics people, and they all came over and spent the day with Al. And I had already spent 2 days with them doing other things, teaching them the story, taking them to the museum. And I have to tell you, it was okay. But when they met Al, they just sat there in his living room in complete awe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was
and his living room is another thing to talk about, full of his trophies and his life rewards. Yeah.
As an author, what has been the most rewarding part of working with Al? And I'm sure you've worked with other people before.
Yeah.
What really is that thing that you experience with Al that you choose to bring forward with the book to inspire readers? What's that thing?
Well, I think that it's his goal of wanting to have a legacy. It's his goal of wanting to leave behind something for the younger people. I was a teacher way back, and Al is the same way. He still teaches adults, he teaches children, and he has certain mentors that I talk about in the book, mentees, I should say. And he really wants to move the story forward by having them carry on for him when he's gone. So particularly his daughter Stephanie, his nephew Michael Love, just certain people that he really wants to focus on and hope that the Highwaymen story continues in the same degree that it is now. It will continue for sure.
Okay.
But
one last question. What one thing has Al done that most surprised you in all of the time you spent with him? Come on, you have one.
Yeah, I do. Asked me to marry him.
He did. Did he really ask you to marry him?
Yeah.
I know. I believe he did. He did. Yep.
That was a little shocking, but...
He is the smoothest personality I have ever seen with the ladies, I have to say. We did a paint show, painting class, and I invited my daughter and all of my family members, lady friends, and when he finished, they just looked at him and they thought, oh, he is the nicest, smoothest man they have ever met. Thank you so much for allowing us to spend time with Mr. Black. And
that's the way it works in his house.
You have no idea. Yeah, I have to say, the thing that has most recently surprised me is we were all at the event with Ralph Occo.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I was surprised at something there too.
He decided to do a scripture quote.
Yes, that was.
And boy, could that man preach.
He can preach. Well, he did at Roy McClendon's. He did like
Yes.
a eulogy, but
Yes.
he can preach and he can recite the Bible for sure.
Yes, yes. And it was at that moment that I looked at those three birds and I went, well, maybe it's not sizzle, maybe it's steak.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Marge. I really, really appreciate it. Look forward to reading the book. I hope you all get a copy of it. And until then, thank you for joining us at Highwaymen Social. Look forward to seeing you next week.